The notification popped up on my phone at 6:03 a.m. I've moved out, filed the divorce papers, don't contact me. No name, no explanation. Just that. I blinked at the screen, still half asleep, thinking maybe I was dreaming or this was a wrong number. Then I saw the bank app notification. 3 separate transfers, all made in the dead of night. Every cent from our joint savings account gone. The emergency fund, the retirement cushion, the college money for our youngest emptied. Not a dollar left. My hands trembled. My ears rang. 22 years of marriage. 3 children. I gave up my dreams, my career, everything. For this man. And this is how he leaves me. By text? I should have crumbled. Should have screamed, begged, cried, called him. But I didn't. Because at that moment I realized something. He thought he held all the power. He had no idea the secret I'd been keeping. A quiet little account in my name only. A paper trail he couldn't touch. And something else, something much bigger, something he never imagined I knew. He thought he'd won. But this story isn't about a woman who got left behind. It's about a woman who saw the storm coming and built a fortress before it hit. My name is Lorraine Palmer, and if you had met me a year ago, you'd have seen what everyone else did, a picture-perfect suburban wife. I was the woman who organized the school bake sales, who kept the house running like a polished machine, who stood beside her husband at every company gala with a soft smile and polished pearls. People said we were the couple everyone wanted to be. But what they didn't see was what I gave up to keep that illusion alive. I met David when I was 24 and just starting my residency in internal medicine. He was charming, ambitious, and 9 years older than me. He told me he admired my intelligence, my independence, my fire. For a while I believed him. We got married when I was 27, and by then he'd convinced me we didn't need 2 demanding careers. "Why don't you just take a break?" he'd said one night after I came home from a 36-hour shift, exhausted and barely able to eat. "You could focus on us, on our future family. It's not giving up Lorraine, it's choosing peace." I gave in. I told myself it was temporary. But then came Emma, then Lucas, then Abby. And somehow my temporary break turned into years of putting others first. I became the mother who ran carpool, the wife who planned birthday dinners down to the last flower arrangement, and the friend who sent thank you cards within 48 hours of receiving anything. And David, he climbed the ladder. Promotions, bonuses, business trips that got longer, and smiles that got more distant. He started calling me predictable. I started feeling invisible. Still, I stayed. I told myself it was the season of life we were in. I volunteered at the local clinic to stay sane. I found joy in the little things, baking sourdough, painting, with the kids, sneaking moments to myself in the garden. I reminded myself of the vows we took. I made excuses when he came home late, or when I smelled perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine. I believed the lies he fed me, not because I was stupid, but because I wanted to believe the life I had built wasn't crumbling beneath me. The first real crack appeared 5 years ago. I was in the laundry room folding David's shirts when a credit card statement slipped out of his gym bag. It was a platinum card I didn't know we had under a business account I'd never seen before. There were charges from hotel bars, spas, and one boutique in Manhattan that specialized in custom diamond bracelets. The next day I asked him about it, calmly, casually. He laughed. "Babe, it's just work stuff, clients' gifts, you know how it is." I nodded, even though I didn't. But that night, I opened my own checking account. Just a little one. I put in $200 from my personal art commission, a piece I'd sold at a local gallery. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And I kept adding to it. Whenever I sold a painting or got paid from a side job tutoring med students, I tucked it away. When I found cash in old coats or spare change in drawers, I deposited it. Slowly, that little seed grew. It wasn't about preparing for a divorce back then. Not really. It was about reclaiming something that had been stripped from me, a piece of myself. The woman I was before I shrank into David's shadow. I thought maybe, just maybe, having that little secret would give me the strength to fight for our marriage, to find my voice again, to make him see me. But he never looked, not really. He got colder, more distant. He stopped asking how my day was, stopped noticing when I got my hair done, stopped pretending to care. He buried himself in work and his phone. He slept in the guest room when the kids were away at camp, And when I asked if we were okay, he sighed and muttered something about midlife stress. And then came the final blow. 3 months before that, 6:03 a.m. text, David asked if I'd help him organize our finances. I want to consolidate some things he'd said, eyes flickering, for tax purposes. I sat with him at the kitchen table, pulled out the binders I'd been keeping for years, meticulously color-coded, and handed over the passwords to our joint accounts. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, hadn't I been the one who kept every receipt, every spreadsheet, every budget on point? What I didn't realize was that I was handing him the keys to our entire life. Looking back, I think he'd been planning his exit long before that morning. He waited until our youngest Abby turned 18. Waited until I'd helped him plan one last company retreat. Waited until he'd charmed me into not questioning why the credit card bill was higher or why he'd been out of town for back-to-back weekends. He was playing chess. But what he didn't know was I had learned how to play too, because I'd kept more than just that secret bank account. I'd kept every receipt, every email, every message from Maya and C and R and whatever other woman he thought I was too blind to notice. I'd backed up phone records, created a spreadsheet with timestamps, stored photos in a private drive. And that little account, it wasn't so little anymore. 784653. That was the number on the screen the morning he emptied ours. Enough to live on, enough to hire someone good, someone who wouldn't just represent me, but someone who would protect me. And yet it wasn't about the money. It was about everything else I'd rebuilt in secret. The confidence, the clarity, the quiet strength I'd been gathering like dry wood waiting for a single spark. So when he sent that cold, heartless message, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I logged into my backup cloud. I emailed myself everything. I put on my favorite earrings, pearls, the ones I wore when I still believed in us, and I sat down at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee. I was done waiting. It was time to move. I didn't tell the kids right away. They were old enough. Emma had just started her first job in Boston. Lucas was in college in North Carolina, and Abby had one foot out the door toward her gap year program in France, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words yet. Not before I made sense of it myself. Besides, I wasn't entirely sure what I was dealing with. I knew David had been distant. I knew the numbers on our credit cards didn't add up. I knew he lied about small things like working late when I'd find his location shared with me parked outside a restaurant we'd never been to together. But something about the way he left, it was too clean, too sudden, almost rehearsed. So I started digging. The first place I went was the joint email account we'd created back when we bought our first house. David rarely used it, but he'd never shut it down. Old school habits. He forwarded travel confirmations there sometimes or school forms, and that's where I found the reservation. A hotel suite in Aspen. 5 nights. Booked under a travel rewards program I didn't know he had access to. The confirmation email was sent 3 weeks before he left. That was before he told me we'd have to tighten our belts this quarter. Before he canceled Abby's senior trip citing unexpected expenses. There were 2 guests listed on the reservation, David Palmer and Celeste Chambers. The name made my stomach drop. Celeste was a marketing consultant David had hired last year when his company launched a new ad campaign. I remembered the way he spoke about her. Brilliant mind, he'd said. Tough negotiator. And then, she's a little intense, but she gets things done. I hadn't thought much of it. He brought home stories from work all the time. It was just noise. Until I remembered something Abby had mentioned months ago in passing. I saw Dad having lunch with some woman at the Willow. They were laughing a lot. He said it was a work thing. The Willow wasn't a work lunch kind of place. It was a white linen tablecloth, candle at noon, overpriced wine by the glass kind of place. Suddenly the puzzle pieces slammed together. I searched her name. Her LinkedIn said she'd been in Aspen last month for a well-deserved retreat. Her Instagram was private, but her profile picture showed her in a ski lodge, wearing sunglasses and a scarf I recognized. Because I had the same one, only mine had gone missing around Christmas. He had given her my scarf. I sat there staring at the screen, unable to breathe. It wasn't just that he had left. It was that he had been erasing me long before the text message. He had been rewriting our life, redistributing the pieces, handing out what used to be mine, like free samples of a newer version of himself. He hadn't just stolen our savings. He had stolen my time, my loyalty, my trust. And he had weaponized all of it against me. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence, remembering a moment from just a few months before. We were sitting at the dinner table eating takeout because he'd said he didn't have the energy to cook. I'd offered to make lasagna his favorite, but he waved it off, said he wasn't in the mood. Now I realized it wasn't the food he wasn't in the mood for. It was me. He had already moved on. But he hadn't expected me to follow the scent of betrayal so precisely. That night, after the kids had called to check in, and I'd gone through the motions of telling them their father was away on a work trip, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the fireproof box in the back of my closet. It held our marriage license, the deed to the house, and something else, something I hadn't looked at in over 20 years. A prenup. David had insisted on it back then. His parents were old money, and even though he wasn't rich at the time, he'd said it was a formality. I was young and too in love to care. I remembered sitting in his father's office signing the document without even reading it fully, thinking what's mine is his, what's his is mine. But as I read it now, something caught my eye. A clause. It stated that in the event of infidelity or financial misconduct, the injured party would retain exclusive ownership of the marital home and any remaining liquid assets provided there was proof. Proof! I had all the proof. Emails, hotel receipts, bank transfers to accounts under C. Chambers Enterprises. I'd even found a screenshot Abby had taken months ago of a dinner bill David accidentally charged to the joint account. It listed "Happy Anniversary" in cursive script on the receipt. Our anniversary was in June. That dinner was in September. I began collecting it all. I organized a folder on my computer labeled Blue Jay, a nickname I gave myself when I first started saving my money, inspired by the birds that kept showing up outside my studio window. Smart, careful birds that remembered where they hid things. Blue jays never forget. And neither would I. By morning, I had printed everything out, documented each instance, and organized it chronologically. I contacted Marlene, an old friend from college, who had gone on to become one of the top family law attorneys in the state. We hadn't talked in years, but when I told her what happened, she didn't hesitate. "Send me everything," she said, "and don't speak to him, not yet." So I didn't. I went about my day like everything was normal. I still made coffee. I still responded to Abby's texts. I even answered a group chat from the book club I hosted last month, pretending I wasn't quietly detonating the foundation of my entire marriage. But inside, something had cracked open, and not in a way that left me broken. It felt like a dam giving way. I was done being blindsided, done being the background character in my own life. David thought he had closed the door on me. He didn't realize I held the keys to every lock in this house, and that he'd been walking straight into the trap I'd been quietly building for years. By the time David called, it had been 5 days since his text. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. His voice carefully measured, as if he were speaking to a client instead of the woman he'd shared a life in bed with for 2 decades. "Lorraine, we need to discuss the logistics. I've already spoken with a mediator. I'd prefer to keep things amicable for the kids." For the kids. As if draining their college savings and abandoning his family by text was his version of fatherhood. Still, I smiled. He had no idea that while he was vacationing in Celeste's designer bathrobe, I'd been turning my grief into strategy. I wasn't impulsive, not like him. My revenge would be patient, dignified, surgical. The kind that left no blood, only silence. And consequences. The first thing I did was move the funds from my private account into a trust under my name, protected by a financial planner Marlene recommended. It was legally mine, untouchable. Just like the house once the prenup came into play. Next, I took careful stock of everything in our name. The house, the lake property we'd inherited from his grandfather, the remaining retirement investments, and his company shares. He had once made me sign over my voting rights just to simplify board matters. But he never officially removed my name from the family LLC registration. A rookie mistake. With Marlene's help, I had those papers in hand. Suddenly, I was no longer just the homemaker he abandoned. I was a shareholder, a legal participant, a woman with leverage. While David was planning a clean split, I was lining up dominoes behind his back. Quietly, thoroughly, and without a single raised voice. Then came the part that felt indulgent. I called Celeste. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. On the second ring, "Hello." Her voice was smooth, confident, the kind of tone women use when they think they've won. "Hi, Celeste," I said calmly. "This is Lorraine Palmer, David's wife." A sharp inhale on her end. Silence. "I just wanted to let you know that I have all the receipts. Aspen, Miami, the transfers, the necklace. I'd suggest advising David to come to the table quickly before this gets very, very public. Unless, of course, you're comfortable being deposed in a financial misconduct case. I could almost hear her swallow her pride through the phone. Is this some kind of threat? Not at all, I replied. It's a courtesy, one woman to another. Then I hung up. I wasn't interested in her tears or explanations. She wasn't my target. David was. She was just another chess piece, and I just reminded her what happens when pawns play queens. By the following Monday, David finally came by the house. I made sure to be home. He pulled into the driveway in his leased Audi, stepped out in his business casual arrogance, and walked to the door like he still had some say in the rhythm of my days. I opened the door before he could knock. "Lorraine," he said, trying for a smile. "You look, well." He always underestimated me. I didn't offer him a seat. I simply handed him the thick envelope I had prepared. "What's this?" "My counterproposal," I said. "Legal, thorough, non-negotiable." He flipped it open and his eyes darted across the front page. His smirk faltered. "You're using the prenup. I'm honoring the contract you made me sign." His face turned crimson. "You can't be serious." "I can. And I am. You forfeit the house. You forfeit any shared assets. You keep your personal accounts. I keep mine. The kids' education fund will be replenished within 30 days. Or I'll file for fraud and I'll make sure the press receives the receipts. You can ask Celeste, I've already spoken to her." His jaw clenched. "You're bluffing." I leaned in, meeting his eyes like I hadn't in years. I was bluffing when I said I didn't see this coming. I was bluffing when I smiled through your lies. But not anymore. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. Not because I was yelling or throwing plates, but because I had become what he never imagined, a woman who didn't need him to survive or to destroy him. He left in silence, envelope in hand, his steps stiff with fury. That night I sat in the garden under the string lights I'd hung myself, sipping tea as cicadas hummed in the background. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt peace. Not the hollow kind that comes from avoidance, but the real earned kind. Still, my plan wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I hosted a brunch. Just a small one, me, the kids, and a few close friends. Emma flew in from Boston. Lucas brought his girlfriend. Abby came home early from orientation. I told them everything. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for pity. I simply shared the truth. And when I finished, Emma took my hand and whispered, "Mom, I'm proud of you." That meant more than any legal victory ever could. The next week, David signed the papers. He didn't try to fight, not because he was sorry, but because he knew he'd already lost. The press never got involved. I didn't need them to. But word got around. He lost 2 clients quietly. A board seat went under review. Celeste's name stopped showing up on his calendar. I never gloated. I didn't need to. Revenge, when done right, doesn't scream. It whispers. It waits. It shows up wearing pearls and calm eyes and a spine of steel. And David? He now lives in a 1-bedroom condo near his office. No lake house. No sprawling family home. No one to clean up after his messes. Meanwhile, I remodeled the kitchen, painted the walls a soft green, hung a painting I made above the fireplace of a blue jay perched on a branch, sharp-eyed and bright. It reminds me every day who I became. A woman who didn't burn the bridge. She simply owned the land on both sides of it. It's strange how the world feels different once you've walked through fire. The sounds are sharper, the morning's quieter, the air tastes cleaner when you're no longer swallowing lies. I used to wake up before dawn, not for myself, but to prep David's breakfast pack, his dry cleaning slips, and check the kids' schedules for him. Now I let the sun wake me up. I brew coffee just the way I like it, strong, black and scalding, and drink it on the back porch while journaling in a notebook I never used to allow myself time for. For the first time in over 2 decades, my day belongs to me. After the divorce was finalized, I thought I might spiral like so many do. The world expects women like me to fall apart when the husband disappears. But the opposite happened. I began to return to myself. I dug up my old sketchbooks from a sealed box in the attic. The paper had yellowed, but the art was still there. Raw, unfinished sketches of faces and cities, colors smeared with old ambition. I had stopped painting when Emma was born. There was never time, never space. David used to joke, "You can go back to that once the kids are older." What he really meant was, once you're no longer needed. Well, now I was no longer needed in the way he meant. So I set up an easel in the corner of my sunroom and began to paint again. At first, my hands trembled, my lines were shaky, but muscle memory is a beautiful thing. It lives in the bones. Within a month, I had 6 new pieces. By the second month, I submitted them to a small gallery downtown under a pseudonym. They sold within days. The gallery owner called me eager to represent E.L. Hawthorne, my pen name. I said yes. I didn't tell the kids right away. I let them find out when Abby came home and saw a familiar brushstroke in a frame hung in the gallery window. "Mom," she'd gasped. "Is that you?" I nodded. She threw her arms around me. "You're really doing it." I was. I also took a job part-time at a nearby medical clinic, not because I needed the money, but because I missed using my knowledge for something that mattered. The work was steady, quiet, and purposeful. The other doctors, half of them younger than my oldest child, looked at me with curiosity, then respect. I hadn't lost my touch. What surprised me most wasn't how easily I returned to the world I'd left. It was how fast the world welcomed me back. Even the house felt lighter. I repainted the bedroom, replaced the duvet with something soft and linen, moved the bed to face the window. It no longer felt like a place where someone left, it felt like a space where someone started over. Friends I hadn't seen in years began inviting me out again. I went to book clubs without worrying if David would complain about dinner. I went dancing once, just once, with a friend of a friend named Miles who wore vintage glasses and quoted poetry when I least expected it. We laughed too much. I let him kiss my hand when he dropped me off, then smiled and said I'm not ready. He respected that. Respected. And it didn't feel like loss. It felt like power. I was rediscovering joy in things I hadn't touched in years, driving with the windows down, trying new recipes that no one criticized, sleeping sideways across the bed with no one pulling the sheets. I got a dog. A mutt named Pepper who barked at delivery men and slept with her head on my lap as I read at night. Even my body began to change. Not because I joined some revenge diet fitness craze, but because I started moving again. I went for long walks. I joined a women's yoga group, one filled with ladies in their 40s and 50s, who didn't care about how flexible you were, just how free you felt. I laughed louder, I smiled more. And the best part, I no longer asked anyone for permission to exist. One day, while cleaning out the attic, I found an old photo of David and me. It was taken on our honeymoon. I remember that version of me, bare-faced, naive, clutching his arm like I was holding on to the future. I didn't feel anger looking at that photo. I felt thankful. Because without the storm, I wouldn't have built the shelter. Without the betrayal, I wouldn't have remembered who I was before I forgot. Emma called me one evening, her voice hesitant. "Mom, would you come speak at my women's leadership group next month? We're doing a series on resilience," and I thought, I don't know, you're kind of the definition of that. I choked up. Not from pride, but from finally being seen. When I stood in that small auditorium looking out at those young faces, women in their 20s, early 30s, trying to navigate ambition, love, sacrifice, I spoke the truth. Not the sanitized version, the real one. I lost myself once I told them, piece by piece. I gave away so many yeses when I wanted to say no. I made myself small to make someone else feel big, and when it all fell apart, I thought I'd vanish. I paused, scanning the room, but I didn't. I built something, out of the silence, out of the pain, out of the ashes. I got a standing ovation, not for being dramatic, but for surviving in a way that left room for others to follow. And that, more than anything, became my unexpected legacy, not just recovering from what he did, but helping others rise from what had been done to them. I still have moments. There are nights when I wake up and wonder what would have happened if I'd just looked the other way again. If I'd accepted his betrayal in silence. If I'd let myself believe it was my fault. But those thoughts fade fast. Because I know now I am not disposable. I am not a shadow. I am not what he left behind. I am what he could never imagine becoming. And while he lives in a rented condo and scrolls through dating apps filled with curated strangers, I'm here in my own house with my own name, making my own choices. Free, empowered, unapologetically whole. It was a Thursday when I got the call. I'd just returned from a morning meeting with the gallery. E.L. Hawthorne's third solo exhibit was being booked for the fall, and I was feeling light, almost celebratory. Pepper had barked once and trotted to the door as I answered. The number was unfamiliar but local. "Mrs. Palmer," the voice asked, careful and professional. "This is she. My name is Dana Rios. I'm an investigator with the Department of Financial Conduct. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about David Palmer." I felt the air shift. What's this about? I asked, heart skipping just slightly. Have you been made aware of his involvement in the Bonneview Capital investigation? I hadn't, but something in my gut told me I was about to learn everything. That afternoon, I sat across from Dana in a corner booth at a discreet little cafe, her suggestion. She wore a gray blazer and no-nonsense expression. She was the kind of woman who had seen it all and didn't flinch. David has been under review for almost 9 months, she explained. We've been tracking movements within Bonneview Capital, offshore transfers, falsified reimbursements, and misuse of client funds. Your ex-husband's name appears more than we're comfortable with. My stomach turned. But he only handled branding and PR, I said, even as the words came out thin. At least that's what he told me. Dana opened a file folder and slid a document toward me. It was a breakdown of 3 accounts, all connected to Bonneview, but with David's name tied to the distribution lines. Transfers to personal accounts. One of them labeled House Reinvestment Fund. That reinvestment had happened 2 years ago. That was the same year David had asked me to help him simplify our finances. My hand instinctively gripped the edge of the table. I thought he emptied our savings to punish me, I murmured. But it wasn't even our money, was it? Dana shook her head. Not entirely. He used your joint accounts to mask client withdrawals. We suspect he'd been laundering client funds by pushing them through your personal accounts, then moving them again to offshore subsidiaries. It's clever, illegal, but clever. I suddenly felt ill. It wasn't just betrayal of the heart. He had used me. He had turned our life into a cover for something much darker. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because one of the accounts he used is still active and it's under your name. We don't think you were involved, but if it goes to trial, they'll subpoena your records. You'll be called as a witness, possibly more. More, Dana hesitated. If it's proven that you helped move the money even unknowingly, you could be held partially liable. Unless, of course, you have records showing you had no knowledge of the activity. I stared at her. Then slowly a quiet fire ignited inside me. I have everything, I said. Receipts, emails, my own personal account clearly separate. Time-stamped notes from the days he made me transfer money just to help him consolidate. Photos of his transaction slips. Even screenshots of texts where he said, "Just sign here. Don't worry, it's all technical stuff." He hadn't been clever. He'd been arrogant. And I had all the proof that he had orchestrated everything. That evening I called Marlene. Within 24 hours she connected me with a federal attorney. Within a week I was officially removed from all liability thanks to my detailed records and cooperation. And 2 weeks after that, David Palmer was formally indicted. Wire fraud, embezzlement, financial misconduct. It made the local news, then regional, then national. The story of a well-dressed, seemingly respectable businessman who used his wife's name to funnel dirty money while cheating with his branding specialist. A headline read, "Husband leaves wife by text, now faces 25 years in federal prison. She helped bring him down." I never asked for that spotlight, but I didn't hide from it either. When reporters called, I gave one statement. I spent years quietly enduring betrayal. I won't spend one more minute staying silent about justice. The internet adored it. Women everywhere sent messages. Notes from strangers flooded in women who had been dismissed, gaslit, manipulated. I wasn't just someone who survived betrayal, now I had exposed it at every level. David, for his part, attempted to contact me twice, once through his attorney, and once shamelessly from jail. The letter was handwritten, full of pathetic apologies, citing stress and losing himself and not realizing what he had. I read it once. Then I fed it to the fire pit in the backyard while Pepper curled beside me watching the paper curl and blacken. Good riddance. The gallery exhibit that fall was my biggest yet, and this time I signed my name, Lorraine Palmer. No pen name, no initials to hide behind. Just me. The collection was called Phoenix Rising. 12 pieces, each one representing a part of the journey, the silence, the suspicion, the unraveling, the confrontation, the reclaiming, the peace. The final painting was the most powerful. A woman standing at the edge of a cliff, not falling but facing the wind. Her face turned to the horizon. Her arms open, not in surrender, but in triumph. Emma bought it anonymously and hung it in her office. Lucas called after the exhibit aired on local TV. "Mom," he said, his voice thick, "I always knew you were strong, but I didn't know you were made of steel." And Abby? She got the tattoo she'd been asking for, a small blue jay perched on her wrist. For both of us, she told me, because we never forget. Now, when I think about the beginning of this story, I don't see that text message anymore. I see what came after. Not the man who tried to erase me, but the woman I became when he did. A woman who faced the ruin of everything she built and chose to rebuild it on her own terms. Brick by brick, truth by truth, brushstroke by brushstroke. And she didn't just survive. She created, she claimed, she conquered. Because the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming someone so whole, so unshakably alive that no one can reduce you again. Not even the man who thought he could walk away and leave nothing behind. Turns out, he left behind everything, and she turned it into a masterpiece.